If you'll indulge me, I'm just going to go off script very, very briefly. I would be remiss if I did not mention the name of my great uncle, Ralph Budd, who was married to my Aunt Jean. He was born in Bronte, Ontario, and he served in the Canadian Army in Italy in the Second World War. He told me many stories of his service as a young person, and I think it's only now that I fully appreciate those stories. He passed away a couple years ago. African Canadians have a long and storied history in Canada's military. One of the first Canadians to ever win the Victoria Cross was also the third Black recipient of this highest military honor, Nova Scotian William Hall in 1857. But African Canadians were not always welcome in the Canadian Armed Forces. In World War I and II, they often faced obstacles to enlistment, being turned away because of their skin color. Still, thousands of young African Canadian men and women persevered and proudly served in those wars and the conflicts that followed, with many seeing their service as a measure of how they were becoming increasingly integrated into broader Canadian society. The letters I'm going to read next were sent to the War Mothers Protective League. Formed in the 1930s, it brought together women from Windsor, Ontario's Black churches to send letters of encouragement, Christmas and Easter cards, and care packages to Windsor-born Black soldiers. Fundraising dinners and concerts were held to support these purchases. The letters the women received in thanks from the soldiers are incredibly touching. Private J.H. Gross of the Essex Scottish Regiment wrote from Europe in the spring of 1945. It is very comforting to know that such good people are doing the best they can to make others happy, and that is just what your thoughtfulness does to the boys over here in this living hell. And the letters were also touched with humor, like this from Private Eddie Pryor, written March 28th, 1945, from, quote, somewhere in Germany, unquote. I hear all the news by a roundabout sort of way. We've been having quite a time. We've been in so many countries, we just call it all Europe now. Or this from Private C.L. Thompson, mailed November 30th, 1944. I am at present somewhere in Holland along the front lines. Holland itself is very quaint in every respect. Dikes, windmills, and people wearing wooden shoes. Incidentally, wooden shoes are very difficult to wear. I've tried them. Sergeant Ray Roberts, also from Windsor and serving with the U.S. Army, wrote this to the League in the late stages of the war from the Philippines in Southeast Asia, where he would have experienced vicious fighting against the retreating army of Imperial Japan. 608th Port Company, 8th July, 1945. War Mothers Protective League, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Dear friends, the Easter greeting that was so thoughtfully sent to me finally caught up with me. The greeting was addressed to Company A, 394th Port Battalion. This company was redesignated 608th Port Company in November 1943. So a lot of ground has been covered and many experiences have been witnessed since then. At that time, I was in Port Moresby, New Guinea. I'd been to Finschhafen, Maffin Bay, Hollandia, all in New Guinea. Then we landed at Leyte in the Philippines. From there, we went to Tiguan, Panay, and later moved into Iloilo City, which was the best stop that we've made so far. My present station is Mindanao. Things here are pretty well under control. When a soldier has been away from home a long time, he sometimes becomes possessed by the current happenings and loses sight on home and home affairs. Periodic letters and good wishes tend to take his mind off the horrors and hardships encountered on the battlefield and allows him an opportunity to reminisce about the good old pre-war days when he enjoyed association and companionship with friends and loved ones. Quite some time ago, while this unit was in Finchhafen, being subjected to daily and nightly bombing for more than 3 months, a comrade of mine sat outside a foxhole. While sitting there, he said, "Well, Ray, if by me coming over here, I have in any way stopped the folks at home from being subjected to the punishment that the people here have had to endure, I feel that my trip over here was worthwhile, and I'm glad that I made the trip." It is hard to estimate the full value of mail from home. Sometimes we don't receive any mail for a month or more, and you would be surprised at the effect that this has on the morale of the company in general. Many of the fellows become skeptical of their home folk and get to the point that they don't care what happens. But then the dark clouds disappear and the sun shines through. Mail call. Again, I thank you for your thoughtfulness. May God ever bless you. As ever, Raymond. The letters sent to the War Mothers Protective League by the soldiers who received their cards and care packages are now part of the Andrea Moore Heritage Collection at the Essex County Black Historical Research Society. Special thanks to Irene Moore for making these available to us, and of course to Kathy Grant of Black Canadian Veterans Stories of War, who has done so much to bring stories of Canada's Black military veterans to a much wider audience.